question.
Yeah. So you haven't lived long enough to be jaded.
Yeah, so you just made a statement before you went live. You said the last X number of years, you kind of see things repeat themselves. And
Yeah.
what we were talking about before the audience joined is the last time we were having a discussion, I was the optimistic one. I was saying that I still am, to be honest, just to be frank. But I was optimistic. I was saying, look, I think both sides really want an end to this war. The Iranians don't want to keep getting bombed, and the Americans, obviously they don't want to crash the global economy. So that's why I really think they will reach a deal. And I still believe that. I still 21 hours, even though it sounds like a lot, 21 hours is not a lot, especially for such a complex issue. But you told me last time, like, Mario, don't get ahead of yourself. Even when the news broke, we did like a 2-hour marathon, and we had like between X and YouTube, we had like 400,000 people listening, and then most of them agreed with you because you made the point like we're getting ahead of ourselves. So maybe a good question is, why do you say that? Where does history show us that these things not going well? I know the Middle East is full of them.
Well, yeah, the difference between Iran and the United States is Iran is willing to recognize the United States as a legitimate sovereign country with certain rights and certain boundaries that should be respected. The United States has zero respect for Iran in that regard. They regard Iran as a nation of religious fanatics, and really it's all about Israel. The opposition of the Iranian, the Islamic Republic, to the the ethno-nationalist fascist government that is now Israel, that's the sole hatred of the United States towards Iran, because Iran, the history of the last, they want to talk about the history. Let's take an honest look at the history. Iran hasn't been out invading other neighbors. I was listening to someone who was talking, Martin Seif, a former Washington Times reporter, was interviewing this guy, and he was talking about how Iran was launching terrorist attacks on all of its neighbors. Excuse me? The record over the last 40 years is that the Sunni extremists are the ones who are most likely to carry out suicide bombings and attacks on Iran, not the opposite. Really, the Shia are not inclined to do a lot of just random violence against others for being Christian or being Muslim, whatever, not being the right kind of Muslim. But it's been just the opposite with the Sunni crowd. So Iran has been relentlessly demonized without the United States taking responsibility for its own actions. I mean, and we've talked about this before, but starting in 1980, when the Carter administration, there was a secret CIA finding, is what I've been told, that basically the CIA began working against the government of Iran, supporting the government of Iraq, and that so that's where Saddam felt confident that he could launch the attack against Iran in 1980, because the United States was going to back him ultimately, which they did, to the tune of, and realize the irony in all of this. The United States provided Iraq with weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons. And that war with Iran lasted till 1988. The war stops. A year and a half later, Kuwait is stealing oil from Iraq. At least that was Saddam's belief. So Saddam asked the United States, because he had been working closely with the U.S. intelligence officials. We were giving him aid, economic aid, military aid. So he was like one of our boys. And he asked the April Glaspie, the ambassador, look, they're doing this to us. You guys got a problem if we go take care of it? And her answer was, we don't have a position on that. And then, back to, because I was around for that invasion. I was at State. We actually, ironically, had deployed what was called the Foreign Emergency Support Team, the FEST, to Trinidad and Tobago in mid-July, because there had been a group of Libyan-backed rebels in Trinidad that had taken over the parliament. They'd killed the prime minister. They were holding hostages. So we sent this interagency counterterrorism team down there. It got settled through negotiation. No, there was no further killing. And so we were trying to figure out how to exfil the plane that our guys flew in on. And, you know, you always want to look for some distraction. And, well, that was the morning that Saddam invaded Kuwait. So we go, well, that's a good cover for action. Nobody would pay attention to us going forward. So, but I remember then I didn't really have the depth and the back knowledge about how we had supported Saddam with weapons of mass destruction during the 1980s. That's what I'm saying.
So that kind of gives you an idea of the mindset of the Iranians. Because like the debate, I was just speaking to Conricus, and he's telling me about how the IRGC, you know, they're an evil ideological, he didn't use the word evil, but maybe he did, ideological group, and all they care about is the destruction, is expanding that ideology, exporting it to other countries. You've heard the argument.
That's
and the destruction of Israel. But they did say, look, he did make the statement that the Supreme Leader did meet with his council, even as late as a few years ago, and did talk about the destruction, wiping out Israel.
Did meet with who?
His council. Ali Khamenei met with his council a couple of years ago. That's what Conricus was telling me. He's talked about the destruction.
What is
the Supreme Council? The Supreme Council in Iran.
So Khamenei, but who did he meet with?
I don't know exactly. So he said Khamenei as late as 2-3 years, in 2023, I think the last time he was talking about coming up with a plan to get rid of Israel. You're saying that
that's just
Ali Khamenei never wanted to get rid of Israel.
No, you know, not the way the Israelis. He wants to. The Iranians want to get rid of this Zionist nationalist, this ethno-nationalist state, that where only people who are, you know, identified as Jewish have the rights. Everybody else, second-class citizens.
How do they get rid of that? How do you get rid of that as another country? Like you have to destroy their government, and you have to do a lot. That's a pretty destructive war.
You do have to. You may have to destroy that government. There are certain governments worth destroying, in my view, because look. I mean, they accuse.
That's the argument they make, but that's the argument he makes for Iran. I just feel like that argument both sides are making against each other.
So let's turn it around and make it for them. I mean,
that's what I fact.
70,000 dead. There's not 70,000 dead Iranians. You know the number they keep coming up with. Oh, they killed 5,000 Iranians. No, they killed 20. No, 35,000. No, it's 45,000 in 1 week. You know, come on. It's the propaganda. I would have far more sympathy for the Israeli argument about, hey, we're a nation. Yeah, you have a right to be a nation, but you're worse than, you know, the Islamic Republic exists as an Islamic Republic, except Jews are allowed, Christians are allowed, and they're not persecuted or prosecuted, you know, despite Western claims to the contrary. In fact, I'm right now trying to set up an interview with one of the leaders of the Jewish community in Tehran, which is, you know, it's been there for, you know, 2,500, 2,600 years. So again, and with all the changes that Iran has gone through, but, you know, it's hilarious that the Israelis like to make the terrorism argument when they're the ones that funded Hamas to carry out terrorism for the express purpose of preventing Palestinians from actually having this.
Look, there's another thing I didn't have a chance to ask Conricus. I'll do it again. We do a lot of interviews. Is we talk about dismantling Iran's nuclear program, which I support. I don't know what your stance is. I've never asked you that question, whether you believe Iran does have the right to have a nuclear weapon. But my counter argument to him, before you answer that question, is like, yeah, I don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But the non-proliferation treaty, Israel's not even a signatory to it.
Yeah. Why does Iran have a right to have a nuclear weapon? Why does Iran have a right? Why does Israel have a right to have a nuclear weapon?
Exactly. I think none of them. What's your position? Should both or neither of them have one?
No, I'm against nuclear proliferation across the board. I think expanding those kinds of weapons creates great risk. But to just arbitrarily sit down and say, "Oh, Israel can have one and Iran can't." If Iran has one, then that reduces the chance that Israel is going to attack it, and vice versa. Because why would Iran attack Israel with Israel sitting there with a nuclear weapon?
Yeah.
Nobody's attacking Pakistan. Well, India and Pakistan, they each have nukes. They know the limits that they can go. But North Korea, you know, they're not lining up to attack that. So, but it's been a red herring. That was what, these negotiations supposedly collapsed on. Oh, Iran's trying to get a nuke. We have evidence from history in the last 46 years that Iran, when confronted with someone using a weapon of mass destruction against it, did not retaliate by building the weapon of mass destruction and then using it. And that was when Iraq was attacking Iran with chemical weapons. Iran didn't turn around and say, oh, we're getting hit by that, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, mustard gas for mustard gas. No, they refused to do it because it was against Islam. So I give them, they're serious about that part of their religion, that there are certain things you don't do because it is a sin in the eyes of God, which is what Ali Khamenei had been saying for years about nuclear weapons. Iran certainly had the technical, scientific capability, the engineering capability to do it, but they said they wouldn't for religious reasons.
Either religious or pragmatic reasons as well. They knew that if they start building a nuclear weapon, they've always wanted to avoid a war with the US. At least that's my position. And it just really looks like it based on their actions since the death of Soleimani, the killing of Soleimani, the 12-day war, the strikes during the 12-day war. Iran's always tried to be more restrained. I've spoke to two people today that made that point. Two of them were part of many negotiations in the region. One of them was Alan Irie, who was part of the JCPOA negotiations. The other one you might know is Aaron David Miller, who worked for the State Department. He was part of a lot of the negotiations over many years in that region. And both made the argument. They both told me, like, Mario, Iran's been very restrained, not only recently, not only during the 12-day war in their response to the American strike on their nuclear program and their nuclear facilities, but even before that, going back to all the way back to Qasem Soleimani. So trying to understand their mindset and where we are right now in the negotiations, we're in a pretty difficult position. Before putting ourselves in Iran's shoes, which I'm sure you'll help us do, is it too early to say the negotiations are dead? Do you think that what I said earlier, I think we said it on the show before the show, that this is part of the process, kind of both sides testing each other and seeing who blinks first?
Well, I would say the negotiations are dead as long as the United States refuses to recognize and accept what are Iran's non-negotiable terms. And those terms are, as they laid them out in the 10-point, so-called 10-point plan, that number one, they've got sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz and will continue to exercise sovereignty over that. And they reserve the right to charge a fee for people, any shipping company wants to come in or out. That's number one. They want an end, a security guarantee that there will be no more attacks against them, as well as an end to the war in Lebanon, and no more attacks on the Houthis or the Iraqis. And they want all their frozen assets released. Those are the critical demands.
The sanctions as well, or not anymore?
Oh yeah, no, and all the sanctions. Of course, all the sanctions lifted,
and the nuclear program,
and that they retain the right to enrich uranium, but remain part of the NPT, and will allow IAEA inspections, which goes back to that's what JCPOA was all about.
Yeah.
So
JCPOA capped it at below 4%, 3.6 or whatever.
Right. Well, they went up to 60% only after the United States walked away from it, and they did that in a way to try to pressure the West. Hey, if you don't abide by this, then we're going to ramp up. So come back and let's keep the agreement on track, which the West chose not to. So if the West finally gets to a point, which I think they may, because the economic situation is going to continue to worsen, it's going to get worse and worse, and then the West is going to be desperate for a deal. Now, Iran is in a way. Maybe they didn't intend it this way, but their attack on the U.S. military bases in the Gulf region is leading to the evacuation of the U.S. forces. So their demand that the U.S. forces withdraw, that's being accomplished because Iran is attacking those bases.
So it's not one of their demands. They're letting it happen organically, you're saying?
Yeah, it's happening now organically. That's a good way
Let's go through the various points. So the first one is a very difficult one, having sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. So just to understand, I think their position is to have temporary sovereignty, but to be able to charge some sort of toll to make up for the damages they cause. And the New York Times article puts it anywhere from $600 billion to $1 trillion in damages, which is just insane of a number. It takes so many years to be able to generate that much GDP, and to be able to destroy it in a month of bombing is just so horrific. Wars are just so stupid. But anyway, it's just to be able to generate enough money to make up for these damages, reparations. So more of a temporary solution, because a permanent solution from an international law perspective, that becomes a pretty big problem, because then any other choke point, any other country that has access to the straits, like Turkey and others that have their own straits, Malacca Straits, there's now a precedent for all these countries to enforce, to potentially leverage their leverage, to be able to use their leverage to be able to charge a toll on these straits as well. So that could cause a pretty big international problem. So do you think Iran wants a permanent ownership of the straits, or more of a temporary solution to make up for the damages?
Yeah, I think they'll want it permanent, because they've now just, this leverage has been their potential all throughout the years, but they were never in a position to exercise it. And what's put them in a position to exercise it are the presence of drones and ballistic missiles, because they talk about trying to open the Strait of, Trump talking about opening the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, well, you go in and try to clear the mines. Good luck with that, because as you clear them, Iran can still replace the mines. You talk about wanting to seize the territory. Well, if you seize that Kemish Island, for example, which is right there at the bend of the strait, you got your troops there. How do they guarantee that the ships that are coming through are not going to get hit by a drone or missile that's launched from 300 miles inland? The only way to guarantee that won't happen is you're going to have to invade and occupy 300 miles inland. And the West is not going to do that. They can't. They don't have the manpower, and the cost would, in terms of loss of life, not to mention the economics of it, would be just too great.
But the problem is that becomes more of a global like a very, very big problem, because if I know that militarily they can do it, but militarily Turkey could do it as well with the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus Straits.
Sure.
The Strait of Malacca, you've got all the Asian in Indonesia, Malaysia that could do the same thing. Bab el-Mandeb, obviously we know that already is being happening, and the rest of them, Dover Strait, the Bering Straits as well. So you've got all these different energy choke points as well that countries could want to start implementing their sovereignty. So that's why, you know how there are certain red lines you don't cross globally, like using nuclear weapons. You don't cross this because now every country could use a nuclear weapon because that red line's been crossed. Breaking international law and enforcing a toll booth, or enforcing sovereignty at a strait may not be welcomed even by countries like China that do want that global order. So wouldn't Iran agree to concede, not completely, but concede where they accept temporary, even though they can militarily enforce it? If they push too far, that's what worries me as well. If they're very emboldened after they win and they push too far, Larry, then they push the US and maybe other countries joining the US, because now they're shaking up a global, an international law that the world really needs to operate on to avoid sovereignty over international waters. So if they are emboldened, they start pushing those boundaries, that might backfire on them. That's a worry. Similar to how Trump was emboldened after Venezuela, I worry they're emboldened after this win.
Well, for starters, once the United States declared that they no longer recognize international law no longer applies. Once you've got the largest, supposedly strongest country militarily in the world saying, we can do whatever the hell we want. If we want to rape you, we can rape you. If we want to kill you, we can kill you. So what? There's no law against that. We're the strongest. So it's the law of the jungle. And so, but Iran, though, has been playing this smartly. They're not looking at a list and saying, okay, these countries are reflexively supportive of the United States. Take Japan as an example. Japan is considered a strong U.S. ally, yet Iran said, Japan, we'll work out a deal. You pay for the oil in Chinese yuan, and you can come in and get
that happened when recently?
Yeah.
Holy
so
shit.
Japan was sending 6 ships. So I see, Iran is really going to only isolate those who are the most the blind supporters of the West and of Israel. Everybody else, there's a deal to be had. And given the conduct of Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, I don't think it's going to be a stretch for Iran to, reach out to other countries and cut deals with them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
At the end, it's only going to be Israel and the United States looking in from the outside.
That's a very good point. Like, this is because when I spoke to the gentleman I mentioned, I can forget, I'm really bad with names, but when I spoke to the negotiator, not Alan, the other one,
Aaron David Miller.
Aaron, he's incredible. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. He's just full of knowledge. And when I had a conversation with him, he told me a scenario which I think is very likely, is that we don't reach a deal in these negotiations, and instead they'll just wither away and it becomes the new norm. It's like they just leave it unsolved. You remember how I said in our discussion early on, like, the best thing Trump could do is walk away and leave the mess. He created the mess, but the best thing to do is not try to fix it and go dig deeper, dig the US deeper into the problem, but just walk away.
Sure.
Not ideal, maybe not fair, because the rest of the world has to solve it, but it could be the best, if not the only solution. And what Aaron said, he goes, Mario, what could happen now in these negotiations, like many things in the region, in the Middle East, they just remain unresolved. Gaza being the most heartbreaking one, Palestine. So this goes on down the same path, that every country needs to make a deal with Iran, and Iran now makes the decisions. And as long as it doesn't impact the US, so as long as the US doesn't suffer directly, and the US barely needs the Strait of Hormuz, so as long as the US doesn't suffer directly, which it won't, then it's no longer America's problem. It's a problem of the rest of the world, and countries will sort it diplomatically with Iran, based on Iran's terms to an extent.
You can make the argument that by keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed, the United States is going to be one of the major beneficiaries, just like Russia, because the United States is a major producer of liquid natural gas. So the liquid natural gas industry in the United States is going to be going through a boom time. And I don't mean from an explosion. I mean just rapid growth and expansion. And it'll become a very profitable sector. And actually, you could almost make the case that that's what Trump is trying to do. Now, his announcement today that he's going to enforce a blockade on the blockade is
I don't get that.
It wouldn't surprise me if an hour and a half before the market opens tomorrow, he'll announce, "Oh, never mind, we're not going to do that." Do his weekly market manipulation thing. But I do anticipate that because of the breakdown of the talks, oil prices are going to go roaring back up into triple digits on the oil futures. They're already in the actual sales are already triple digits at like 140. But the oil futures were counting that this crisis would pass and we'd be in calmer times. And that's what drove it down to like 97. But it'll be up and the stock market will be down, unless Trump comes up with another one of his magical last-minute saves, supposedly.
So American gas exports are up since the Strait of Hormuz has been closed. Obviously, you'd expect that, especially to Europe, I think. Less so to Asia as well, Europe and Asia. So yeah, the US could be gaining in some way, but also the US is suffering. Trump is suffering. Gas prices are up, and when the global economy suffers, the global economy suffers. The world's biggest economy will suffer as well. Before we look at Trump's strategy, let's go through the Iranian demands that we went through earlier. We talked about the sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. My guess would have been it would be temporary. You said it would be permanent because they can. The latter could be tricky, but you never know. Everything that's impossible is becoming impossible. Then the second one is non-negotiable: security guarantees.
Right.
No one should be disputing that. I don't know how those guarantees look like. I know we've discussed this before, but who can guarantee that the US won't strike a country?
Well, one way to guarantee that is to force all U.S. bases in the area in the region to close. If they're out, then it's really a difficult task to both attack and sustain an attack. Just throwing one punch, dropping one bomb, that doesn't solve anything. And what the United States is going to learn, much to its chagrin, is we do not have the military force to be able to sustain the operation at the level we think would be required to defeat Iran. Because ultimately, to defeat Iran, you're going to have to send in a ground force. They're going to have to occupy the country, and that's not going to happen. And compounding all of this, though, is that China's role has become quite dynamic, both in terms of supplying advanced weaponry. I mean, I've learned that in the last week, China has been supplying some advanced air defense systems to Iran, and the U.S. planners are worried about it, significantly worried.
There's reports today that came out that China's preparing to supply significant amount of man pads to Iran as well,
Sure.
which are very capable from an air defense perspective.
Now, they're doing that, and then at the same time, they're preventing the delivery of rare earth minerals to the United States that are essential for producing these weapon systems that have been depleted as a result of this war. So it's like the worst of both worlds for the United States, that the Chinese are stepping up their military involvement while also creating obstacles for the United States to, if you will, rearm itself.
How significant would the supply of the man pads be? Would that make Iran a lot more capable? And how, before we go back to the terms from Iran, if we have a ceasefire till the 21st, let's say it's delayed till the end of the month and it fails, and also a separate question before we go back to Iran's point, how much could Iran regroup in that period of time?
Oh, significantly. Yeah. I mean, it's just the longer this delay goes on, the more these new air defense systems can be brought in and get put into place. They'll probably be operated though by Chinese, not by Iranians, but the Iranians will work alongside their Chinese counterparts to learn, because these are not just, this isn't like plug and play guitar where you press keys and it plays a sound. You have to, it has to be integrated into a radar system or a system for detecting inbound aircraft and their azimuth and such. So, but both China and Russia are stepping up to assist Iran in this, because this is really sort of an existential battle, and it has exposed the weakness of the United States. That there was always the assumption that the United States was so big and powerful that one little country couldn't stand up to it. Well, yeah. we're now 43 days. Let's see, 12, and we were 32. Yeah, 45 days into this now. So that is earned Iran genuine respect around the world.
Let's go back to the negotiating table. So number two, I won't question that at all. Security guarantees are the least that Iran should aggress. It's more how they would look like. You talked about American bases pulling out of the region.
Right.
What about, I know it's been floated here and there, is there any possibility of Russian or Chinese bases in Iran?
Unlikely, but advisors, Chinese and Russian military advisors, yeah, highly likely on that front. But I don't think that's just not their thing. I mean, neither Russia nor China have been big on establishing a military base overseas. The only real one they've got that Russia has going now is in Syria, at the air base that's up north.
3, end of the war in Lebanon. That's a nice ringtone.
Yeah, that was the good, the bad, the ugly.
End of the war in Lebanon. So that's a tricky one because that comes down to Israel. Who makes the decision?
Well, Israel
or the US. But will Netanyahu listen to Trump if Trump told him to stop attacking Lebanon?
Well, he would if Trump exercised the power that he has over Israel, which Trump will not. Trump is, maybe he's being held hostage. That was the argument that Tucker Carlson made.
Is he hinting? I saw that Tucker. He's been very vocal against Trump. He's a lot more vocal than I am in his belief on Israeli influence over the US. I think there's influence, but Tucker goes really down that rabbit hole. And he may be right. He's a lot more experienced than I am. But is he hinting at Epstein? Like a lot of people have been saying that there is something to do with Epstein against Trump. I find that hard to believe, but you never know anymore. I don't know.
Well,
because just to be clear, attacks on Beirut have stopped. The massive evacuations in southern Beirut have stopped, Larry. So there's something to be said there. And Netanyahu did apologize to Qatar.
Yeah, well, you've seen, maybe you haven't, the revelations from Melania Trump's 20 friend for 20 years. This Amanda Ungaro, I think that's her name. Because the other day on last Thursday, out of the blue, Melania shows up to start denying that she ever knew Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, and said, "Oh no, Well, this Ungaro is her ex-husband. They've been in a custody dispute over a teenage boy. Her ex-husband had ICE lock his wife up and then deport her to Brazil. He is a Trump official. He got Pam Bondi and the head of Homeland Security to lock up his ex-wife and have her thrown out of the country. Now, why that's important is she was there at the beginning of the relationship between Melania Trump and Donald Trump. She's putting it's being put out today, I think, in Spain. So the story is coming out today, and this was Melania trying to get out in front of that story. So they're going to be able to identify. She said that there's clear evidence of Donald Trump having sexual relations with underage girls, and she's coming out with that, and she says she's got the evidence to prove it. So you've got that hanging over in the background, and then Trump's just bizarre behavior of late, trashing, the attacks he's made leveled on Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, Megyn Kelly. Now, because people are now resurfacing all these videos from the campaign 2024 where he's got them calling them pals and they're great people and they're wonderful and he have them on stage. And now he's accusing them of being low IQ and stupid. I mean, just the kind of the insults that a 13-year-old kid with bad social skills would use. It's immature and silly, and it has been watching all these folks respond. In fact, Alex Jones just did a hilarious piece.
I saw it. Yeah,
I don't know what the name of the comedian is, but he gave him the IQ test. Tucker is putting out caps that say low IQ on them. So yeah, I mean that is the way you hurt Donald Trump. You make fun of him. You make him a joke, and he can't stand that. And so with all this escalating in the background, Trump is in a position to tell Israel what to do, and he won't, because Israel's got something on him. That brings us back to where we started.
Yeah. All right. So that's where we started. The end of the war in Lebanon. Do you think Israel's not the one that listens to Trump? Netanyahu decides to an extent. Obviously, Trump can pressure Israel, but not dictate to Israel. Number 4, the frozen assets for Iran. Different people give me numbers, but it's about over $100 billion if you put it all together. Now, Iran, I think, is requesting $23 billion out of it. Do you think they'll get those $23 billion?
Not until the United States is ready to make a deal. And so,
but do you think the U.S. would fold on this one?
Ultimately, I think they will. They'll have to, because what we're looking at here is it's a global recession. It's now a question of, will it become a global depression? And the United States will come under increased pressure from the people that it thought were its allies, who are now facing economic chaos at home, and they're gonna choose survival over maintaining a relationship with the United States.
By the way, there's a Brigadier General Hassan Hassanzadeh, commander of the IRGC, who Israel said he was killed. He was just seen in a motorcycle celebrating. That's him right there. That's just roaming around the streets in Iran. He's the commander of Brigadier General in the IRGC. He was labeled as dead by Israel during the war. So he turned out to be similar to the 12-day war. Just came out now. Now, maybe I don't know how significant it is. Maybe they got one wrong, but just significant nonetheless. That not everyone that Israel says has been killed means has been killed. We saw that in the 12-day war as well. Just a quick point, because that's a good time to talk about Trump's response. He talks about doing a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. So what he's doing, something we've, again, talked about before, is that what Iran's doing right now is like, hey, our biggest card is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, because we hold the global economy hostage on multiple fronts. Now, not only oil itself, but refined oil. A lot of the refining for Europe is done in the Gulf. You've got the gas from Qatar, helium is required for the chips, for the microchips that is leading the technological boom, the AI boom. You got fertilizers. It impacts all aspects of the economy, from cargo ships themselves that need the fuel to the planes that need diesel. You've got the microchips, all the technology sectors are going to be impacted. You've got fertilizers, food shortages. You got every single sector of the global economy is going to be hit, and Iran has their chokehold on that chokehold. So what Trump is trying to do is do the same thing, but not do it to Iran. So Iran's still able to export their oil and still able to make bank. And we've talked about how they are in a better position by selling more oil than before the war at a higher price.
Right.
Well, Trump knows this, and he's trying to close that up for Iran. Now, the good thing is it could work. It could choke off Iran. But the bad thing is that the global economy is completely screwed now. Gas prices would just skyrocket.
Well, yeah, because remember, Trump lifted the sanctions on Iranian oil because they needed that Iranian oil supply on the global market to avoid the very chaos that you're talking about. That's why I say the United States is not working from a strategy. They're just, man, wake up one morning and, however they feel, they do that. It's feelings. It's not thought. So, and that's why I say it would not surprise me at all that with making this announcement today that he's going to put a blockade on, that's stock futures are going down, oil futures are going up. And then in the morning, like at 7:30, an hour and a half before the market open, Trump will make an announcement. We've reconsidered. We're not going to do this, and to try to again drive the price of oil back down and the stock market back up. And somebody within the Trump sphere is making hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars off of this insider trading because he's done it. He's done it 3-4 weeks in a row.
Yeah, you've seen those reports, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know if someone on Iran, because maybe it could be not someone on the US side, because it could be someone on the Iranian side, because they know when Trump is going to change his mind. There's a lot of talk behind the scenes. So it could be someone on the Iranian side making those decisions, making those trades.
If it was on the Iranian side, then
that'll be ironic though.
Well, you'd be assured though that the SEC and DOJ would be all over them and prosecuting. So that's why I said this is the Trump insider, because they're not touching him.
You're saying yes. Okay, I understand. Well, someone's in Iran is going to keep hiding in Iran and keep making the money, but they might freeze his account. You're right. Okay, so that's not good. Let's look at the last point then. You've got the last 2 points: sanctions and then nuclear program. On the sanctions, do you think Trump would lift them? Because that goes to an important point. I'll let you respond to these two in a kind of a final point, Larry. Is for them to reach a deal, Iran needs genuine concessions on the American side, genuine concessions to make up for the damage they've been through.
Sure.
And Trump doesn't really need genuine concessions on the American side. The American economy has not been pummeled, has not been bombarded, does not face $1 trillion in damages. He needs a political win, especially for J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance needs a political win in these negotiations so he can then use it in the next elections, presidential elections. So is it fair to say, as you respond to these points, you can also maybe answer this one, is it fair to say for a deal to be reached, Larry, Iran just needs to be smart enough to give a political win for Trump so he can label it as a win, and that's maybe their nuclear program would be one, because that's always been the main reason, not the only, but the main reason Trump has used to justify the war. If Iran gives him that, Trump may be willing to concede on the sanctions, which is the point you're going to refer to now, maybe even some of the frozen assets, and somehow force Netanyahu to end the war in Lebanon, putting aside the whole Epstein possibility. And even give temporary sovereignty of the Strait of Hormuz for Iran, let the rest of the world deal with it, as long as it gets a political win.
Yeah, well, no, it's there to be had. If Trump was smart, he would go to the Iranians and say, look, we recognize that you have the right as a sovereign nation to enrich uranium. But I need the assurance that you're not going to enrich to the point that you could make a nuclear weapon. If you agree to limit to 3%, 10%, whatever, then we will immediately lift the sanctions. In fact, I'd go in and say, before we even start this part of the negotiation, we are now lifting sanctions in X, Y, and Z area as a show of good faith to you that we're serious about this. But we lift those sanctions, do this deal, lift the sanctions, and then Trump gets to come away and say, hey, I've now secured, unlike the old JCPOA, which had a 10-year limit, we've now got a permanent agreement in place with Iran. They could do that. And he could take credit. We've stopped the nuclear threat. And then at the same time, tell Israel, okay, shut the hell up and stop attacking your neighbors. You're going to have to reach a deal with the Palestinians, because we're not going to continue to fund your war. So that's where I think Iran's at, that they're not going to abandon the Palestinians. And the Israeli settlers continue to ratchet up the tensions. They were taking over parts of Al-Aqsa Mosque today and yesterday, and it's just desecrating that mosque. And it's just, the problem with the Zionists is they have no respect or toleration for other religions. It is all other religions are anathema to them. Whereas while Islam is frequently criticized or accused of having that attitude is really common to the Wahhabis, the Deobandis that are there in Pakistan. But the vast majority of Muslims are not like that, which is why you look at Iran, they've had the Christian population has been there for, more than 1,000 years, and the Jewish population for, more than 2,500 years.
I've got news for you just as we wrap up. Just now, breaking: CENTCOM announces the U.S. will begin to blockade all exports from Iranian ports starting Monday. So that's tomorrow, 10 a.m. ET. Quote, the blockade will be enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas, including all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. CENTCOM forces will not impede freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports. So it's going to be enforcing a blockade against Iranian ships. So it seems that he's not bluffing on this one. Well, he's going to sacrifice the energy markets to force Iran to concede.
He doesn't have enough ships. And are they going to put if those ships get within 200 miles of Iranian ports, they're going to blow them the hell out of the water. Mark my words, that this is posturing. This is more theater by this, orange knucklehead that sits in Washington. Yeah, sounds good on paper. They don't have enough ships. The ocean's a big place, and if the Iranians send out 10 ships, the United States doesn't have 10 ships there to stop them. I think they've got a total of 6. So, and if those ships are flying a Russian flag or a Chinese flag, good luck stopping that, because I fully expect that the Chinese and the Russians will send their own warships to accompany.
That's how things escalate, man. That's how things escalate. That's how things drag on other countries.
Yeah.
Drag in other countries.
Yeah. So, my friend,
Larry, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, I'm going to go see one of your other friends, Peter Kersen.
Oh, nice. All right, man. Enjoy.
All right, my friend. Hey, keep up. I enjoy your positive attitude. You keep looking. Look on the sunny side. Always on the sunny side.
I'll try. Start working out these days. Thank you, Larry.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Just for the audience as well, I don't think I'll do another interview today. I'm not sure about this news. We'll get one more guest in a bit to discuss the enforcement of the threat by Trump. But I hope you enjoyed the interviews. And as you could see, a reminder to all of you, because a lot of you are going to get upset when I push back against my guests, whether it's Conricus or Larry or anyone else. So my goal in this is not to create an echo chamber, to really understand the Israeli side, understand the Iranian perspective, the American perspective. I don't care who it is. If there's a war with ISIS again, I want to understand ISIS's perspective. I really don't care who it is. I'm always curious to understand the other side. And what I really get a kick out of is trying to find a middle ground. That's why, I asked Conricus earlier, I'd love to have him on the show with a former member of the IRGC. That'd be really interesting. Or the professor I did from Iran, not sure if you guys watched it, because he's very supportive of IRGC, very critical of what the US has done, also very pragmatic. And having him with someone, and very hawkish, and someone like Conricus, who's also very hawkish, that's what I enjoy doing. I remember when someone asked me a couple of years ago when I was doing this. Back then, I was mainly focusing on presidents, prime ministers, and doing less interviews with experts like Larry and others a couple of years ago, and only on X without YouTube. But someone asked me the questions like, what are you doing this for? I'm like, my end goal would be to not only interview, Putin, interview Zelensky. I got close to both of them. I interviewed Lavrov, obviously, and Lukashenko, and I interviewed almost interviewed Budanov, but there was a security risk. But the goal is to be able to one day, and I know that's very hopeful, but kind of give you an idea of kind of what I enjoy as a result out of all this, is having, Putin and Zelensky sitting on the table. Again, it will never happen with Putin and Zelensky, but I can do it on a smaller scale with people like the professor and Conricus as one example, or maybe get a negotiator, even after this all ends, a negotiator on the Iranian side, or a negotiator on the American side, and sit on the table and have a discussion. And the last thing to kind of wrap up is, it reminds me of a day during the Gaza war when we're doing spaces. If you remember me, guys, in the old days, I would do the spaces instead of video interviews. And in one of the spaces, I had an IDF pilot. It was in the midst of the Gaza war when it first started, in the first few months. I had a Gaza pilot and a journalist in Gaza who had a big chunk of his family killed by IDF strikes. And I've had both of them on stage having a discussion. The pilot talking about, why he would strike targets in Gaza if he knows there's Hamas tunnels under them, even if it's a hospital. And the journalist saying, like, that's barbaric, but like, why would you do that? And they both talked about October 7th and what that did to Israelis. Just remember that day when both of these people were having a discussion. Many other examples happened throughout my journey of doing spaces. It reminds me of why I enjoy doing what I'm doing. It's having both sides find some sort of middle ground. And there's many other examples. I had people on the battlefield in Russia and Ukraine on my space having a discussion. I've had people from Israel and Lebanon, which are legally not allowed to even talk to one another. I'm starting to work now on more of these debates and discussions, not debates, but discussions between both sides together on a table. And like, one thing I want to really achieve right now, and I told my team a couple of days ago, I would love to get not a diplomat, but a politician on the Lebanese side and a politician on the Israeli side, finding a legal loophole, which I think I have one, and being able to achieve that, having them both on a table, having a discussion. That's what I really enjoy doing, and that's what you'll see me achieve in my interviews. So when you see me push back, or when you see me say things that I might even disagree with, but what I'm planning to do is, play devil's advocate, to kind of have that discussion, that back and forth. And, if you guys enjoy listening to, I wouldn't say echo chambers, but, shows that are biased in their own opinions, and there's two people with both of them with the same opinion, having discussions and agreeing with each other the whole time. You might not find it on this show, but if you want to find discussions back and forth and debating ideas and trying to see things from different perspectives, you'll probably find it here. And I'm even telling my guests, like, I love being debated, being corrected. If a guest disagrees with me, I want the guest to tell me that. I don't have an ego. I just enjoy these discussions, and I enjoy learning from them as well. So anyway, that's my goal in these discussions. I'll remind you every once in a while, just so you understand why I'm doing this and what the purpose of the show is. And I hope you enjoy this. I'll see you again tomorrow. I do these every day now. As you can see, multiple lives a day throughout this Iran war, and we'll see if we continue it once we reach peace, but not sure how when that is. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.